Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, let me start by expressing my profound gratitude to the organizers, the Political Network for Values, and to our hosts, our great friends here in Bogota. Thank you for bringing together the third Transatlantic Summit. Thank you for the opportunity to speak at this significant occasion here in the Congress of the Republic of Colombia. The topic of this panel is threats to freedom of religion and conscience around the world. I'd like to address this subject in light of some personal experiences as a former legislator of the European Parliament and since 2018 as a member of the Swedish Parliament. Article 18 of the UN Declaration of Human Rights states as follows: everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience and religion. This right includes freedom to change his religion and freedom to manifest his religion in teaching, practice, worship and observance. End of quote. My friends, freedom of religion is not a national issue. It's a universal right. Freedom of religion is individual. Each and everyone has the right to believe, convert, or to have no religion at all. Today, persecution based on religion is a global challenge. Millions of people from different religions live under persistent harassment and threats. Christians are the most persecuted religious group in the world. 245 million, every ninth Christian person is affected. Persecution is going on in at least 75 countries, according to the international organization Open Doors. As a member of the European Parliament, I worked with these issues related to persecution of Christians over the last years. Due to the appalling atrocities committed by ISIS, much of the efforts have been focusing on the most vulnerable groups in the Middle East, notably Iraq and Syria. These groups, who in the Islamist and jihadist delusions are considered infidels and therefore should be subdued or killed. Almost half of Syria's approximately 2 million Christians have been forced to flee due to persecution and violence. In neighboring Iraq, the situation is similar. The amount of Christians has decreased from around 1.5 million to less than 300,000 today. A historic mosaic of religious and cultural diversity is about to be torn apart and shattered forever. In 2016, I had the privilege to introduce a resolution in the European Parliament that recognizes the mass atrocities of ISIS against Christians and Yazidis as a genocide. After deliberations, after negotiations, the resolution passed with support of a broad majority in the Parliament. The decision was actually historic. For the first time ever, the European Parliament did recognize an ongoing genocide. Since then, it has been amazing to see that the genocide resolution made a difference. After the recognition, it has been a number of other parliaments had followed suit and also taken the same decision. For example, the House of Commons in the British Parliament, the French National Assembly, the German Bundestag, the Australian Houses of Representatives, the Senate and House of Representatives of the US Congress, as well as the White House. This is very important, as recognitions in themselves become a confirmation that the victims have suffered from the worst and the most heinous crime according to international law. The victims and their families get an opportunity to obtain redress, personal dignity, and self-respect can be restored. The recognitions of various parliaments is important even in some other aspects. Research shows that it is not until the word genocide is used that the international community reacts and takes action. Furthermore, the probability increases for a legally binding recognition of genocide by the UN Security Council. Last summer, I visited Iraq. It was one of several visits during the last years in this war-torn and broken country. This time I went to Christian towns of Karakosh and Teleskov in the Nineveh Plains. I met with ordinary people, displaced persons, political representatives, church leaders. Generally, I met with brave men and women who have suffered so badly, without a substantial signal of hope, many of them considering giving up. But giving up a place where your family have lived for generations, where your ancestors have farmed the land for centuries, that is not an easy thing. It breaks your heart. Understanding is important, but might be painful. Listening to these stories about human suffering, seeing the consequences of terror and expulsion was overwhelming, and it broke my heart. And it reminded me of what we have to do. Any step taken in order to raise awareness about the alarming situation for Christians in Iraq and Syria is essential. Whether it concerns humanitarian aid, reconstruction of destroyed property and churches, or just making sure that Christians are not forgotten, it is important. At the same time, there is a need for a more holistic perspective as well. Alongside the work for a binding international recognition of genocide, it is crucial today to secure political and civil rights for persecuted Christians. As ISIS and its terrorist units are driven out of Iraq and Syria, there is now a window of opportunity. An opportunity for the international community to address the future for Syriacs, Assyrians, Chaldeans, Yazidis, and other minorities. Aside security and protection, international support for a sustainable political solution is needed in order to create the conditions necessary for repatriation of these groups to their ancient Christian homelands. Under a political autonomy within the framework of the Iraqi constitution, it is possible to restore fundamental rights for Christians in Iraq. Distinguished friends, United Nations former Envoy for freedom of religion, Heiner Bielefeld, has stated that human rights without the dimension of religion and belief has no meaning. This is indeed a message that needs to be brought to political decision makers around the world. The disappearance of Christians from the Middle East will mean the termination of indigenous groups from the region. Middle East, without the mosaic of peoples, will be a region rapidly going into dark age with less hope for peace and stability for a long period of time. As political representatives, as church leaders, as citizens of free countries, we need to realize that such an assistance is also in our interest. Therefore, we must never hesitate in the defense of religious freedom. At the end, this is about standing up for a foreign policy based on the values of human dignity and fundamental human rights. Thank you so much for listening.